In this video, I'll show you how easily we can start extending our Atlas applications using the Atlas Control Toolkit. To do this, we'll download and install the toolkit and then use some of the control extenders provided to build a sample application. To get started, point your browser at atlas.asp.net and click on the download button at the top of the page. Then, scroll down to the Atlas Control Toolkit link, click on that link to download the executable. Alternatively, from the Atlas home page, look in the top right-hand corner and see the section labeled Atlas Control Toolkit. If you click on the link there, you'll be taken to the Atlas landing page, which not only has a link to the download, but has a link to current blog entries and current forum posts about the Atlas Control Toolkit. Once the file finishes downloading, you double-click on the executable. Note that this is a self-extracting zip file, so we'll have to select the location where we want the files to be deposited. Since most of the Atlas applications that I build will use the Atlas Control Toolkit, I'm going to install the toolkit right alongside the Atlas framework itself. So I'm going to select Program Files, Microsoft ASP.NET, and then just add a subdirectory. I'll call it Controls. Unzip. When I click on OK, a little script will fire. This will start an instance of the Visual Web Developer web server and take me to a page that shows me the control examples and the walkthroughs that are available for the Atlas Control Toolkit. Now that we have the Control Toolkit files installed, we can start building our sample application. I'm going to build the demos in Visual Web Developer. Visual Web Developer is the free version of Visual Studio. If you don't have a copy, you can get yours by pointing your browser at msdn.microsoft.com/express. It's 100% free. This is what we use to build the demos today. So I'll click on Create Website, and we'll select an Atlas website, and then I'll pick a name, Atlas Control Hello World. So now if we double-click on our default.aspx file, and we look in our toolbox, we scroll down to the bottom, we'll see that we'll see the Atlas Framework Control tool tab that we created when we installed the Atlas Framework itself, but we don't yet have a toolbox tab for the Atlas Control Toolkit controls. So I'll create one by selecting Add Tab, Atlas Control Toolkit. Now, to populate the Atlas Control Toolkit, if I just go out to Windows Explorer and navigate to the install directory for the Atlas Control Toolkit, which in our case is Program Files, ASP.NET, Controls, and select the sample website directory, and then bin, we'll find a pre-built instance of the Atlas Control Toolkit DLL. I can then take that DLL and drag it into the Toolbox tab that I just created, and Visual Web Developer will auto-populate the tool tab that we created with all of the controls that are available in that DLL for the Atlas Control Toolkit. And now we can start building our demo application. Let's hop over to Design Mode, and we're going to get started just by adding a couple of standard ASP.NET controls to our web page. So I'll add a label, and I'll add a button. And for the label, we're just going to go in and remove the default text, and I'm going to push the size out a little bit, and we'll resize our button as well, and then we'll double click on the button to create a button click event handler. Right. And this is just going to create a little bit of server-side behavior, and all I'm going to do is stuff a little static text into that label. So say hello Atlas developers. So we'll just quickly run this so we see that we have the sort of a normal Hello World ASP.NET application. And when we click on the button, we get the server-side behavior that we expect, Hello Atlas developers. So what we want to do now is we want to use one of the control extenders that comes with the Atlas Control Toolkit to change the behavior of this button when a user clicks on it. So if we scroll down to our Atlas Control Toolkit tab in our toolbox, you'll notice that there is a control extender called Confirm Button Extender. So if I drag that out of the toolbox and drop it onto my web form, notice this gives me a message, tells me that because we selected the Atlas template, we already have an instance of the Atlas DLL. Do we want to replace it? Yeah, that's okay. And now we have a confirm button extender in our web page. Notice that the confirm button extender itself doesn't have user interface. Its purpose is to extend the behavior and properties of an existing control. So in this case, it's a button extender, so it's going to extend the behavior of button controls. So if we look at the properties, these are the properties for the extender itself, but if we switch to the properties for the button, you'll notice that we have this new collection of properties called confirm button extender. And this is because by virtue of dropping a confirm button extender control onto our web form, the confirm button extender injects its functionality into the button instance that we've dropped in the page, and by doing that, it inserts some new properties into the properties collection for the button. So in this case, we have confirm text, and we can just add a little confirmation text for the confirmation dialog. And then if we run our application, we'll see a different behavior when the user clicks on the button. So when I click on the button, notice we get this confirmation dialog that contains the text that we configured in the property. Now, notice some of the subtlety of this behavior. If I click on cancel, I don't get the server-side behavior. So if I click on cancel, the submission to our server doesn't actually happen. But if I click on OK, then we actually make the request to the server-side behavior gets executed, and we get the behavior that we'd expect. What this means is that by virtue of using this confirm button extender, we get client-side behaviors in generated JavaScript. And if you're a JavaScript developer, you might look at this and say, well, creating a confirm dialog in JavaScript is not that difficult. And you're right, but we get two advantages using the control extender instead of writing custom JavaScript. The first is that we don't have to write custom JavaScript. In fact, we can use the Visual Studio or Visual Web Developer-based design experience that we're used to without having to write custom JavaScript and then include that JavaScript in every page whose buttons we want to have this confirmation behavior. The second thing is if we ever want to change that behavior, so for example, if we wanted to change from a default confirm dialog to some custom confirm dialog, then all we would have to do is change the extender control, and then whatever pages use that extender control would automatically pick up that new behavior for the confirm dialog, and we wouldn't have to cut and paste custom JavaScript to all of the pages that we wanted to have that new behavior. So it's a much more agile way of customizing this client-side behavior. Next, let's take advantage of one of the other control extenders that comes with the Atlas Control Toolkit. So to use this one, we'll start by dragging a couple of standard ASP.NET text boxes onto our form. And note these are standard text boxes, but what we want to do is we want to provide the user some input as to what's supposed to go in these boxes when the page loads. So in order to do this, if we go back down to our Atlas Control Toolkit Toolbox tab, we'll notice that there is a control type, text box watermark extender. So this is an extender control that specifically extends text boxes with a watermark. So if we go look at the properties for the text box, now that we've included an instance of the text box watermark extender in our web form, you'll notice that the watermark extender control has inserted some properties into the text box property collection, and we have these two new properties, watermark text and watermarks CSS class. So let's add some text to the watermark. We'll say, please enter your name. All right. For now, that's all we're going to do. Now if we run our little project, we'll see that we get this watermark placed in the text box by default. When I enter the text box, the watermark goes away. If I leave the text box without entering any text, the code is smart enough to know that and puts the watermark back. If I enter some text, however, and then leave the text box, the watermark stays gone. Now, this is great functionality, except the user interface experience really isn't as intuitive as I'd like. What I'd really like, rather than to have the watermark just appear as plain text, I'd like the watermark to appear as special text so that the user really knows what they're supposed to do with that field. So to do that, if we go back in and we look at the properties that got inserted by the extender for text boxes, we'll notice that in addition to the watermark text, there was a watermark CSS class. This is in keeping with the ASP 2.0 CSS friendly development model. So in this case, we can add a CSS class that we want to take effect whenever the watermark gets displayed. So we'll just create a name. We'll just call the class watermark. I haven't written this CSS class yet. We're just going to name it watermark. And then I'm going to swap into source code view and go and install a little style sheet. Now, normally in your application, you're probably going to want to do this by including a reference to an external CSS file. But in this case, we'll just add a little CSS file here. And notice I've created one, a CSS file inline, and created one class called watermark. And in that class, I've specified a background color of red and a foreground color or text color of yellow. So that's it. We'll just save our page. Right? We haven't added any logic. And then if we now run our sample application, notice that not only do we get the watermark, but we get the CSS style for the watermark that we intended. Right? So now, if we add some functionality, add some text, the watermark goes away. If we lose focus and we haven't actually added text, the watermark with the styles come back. So this just gives you a quick example of not only how to install the Atlas Control Toolkit and configure Visual Web Developer for the Atlas controls that come with the toolkit, but also using the control extenders to improve our Atlas-based experience. This is just a tiny fraction of the kind of functionality that's provided by the Atlas Control Toolkit. Set your browser's homepage to www.asp.net so you can be alerted when new How Do I videos get posted, in which we'll cover all of the various aspects of the Control Toolkit and the sample controls that get installed, as well as developing your own custom controls and control extenders.